Honestly, Bully, like, I want to talk more about what we saw at the beginning. There's going to be time, like you said, the good, the bad, the ugly. I think we both can agree the good from last night was John Cena and Cody Rhodes. And to your point that you made earlier on in the show, Bully, is that there's still a lot more meat on this bone. Like, they have done a really...
I didn't make that point. You always make that point. So credit to you.
But Bully, you also said there's still so much that we have not heard from.
You are always talking about how much more meat there is on the bone. Did you get that much more meat last night? Did you, other than him, this is what stuck out to me, other than him saying, I am going to ruin pro wrestling, what other major point stuck out to you?
Well, let me break it down, because to me, since the kick in the balls, we've seen John Cena twice, last week and last night. Last week was kind of like the reasoning that he has turned his back on the fans. Like, last week, he was directly talking to the fans about, like, listen, you're making this easy for me. Listen to you, the profanity. This is what I've had to put up with for the last 25 years. So don't expect, like, anything different from me now, because I have had to take your bullshit for 25 years. So now I got 10 months to throw it right back at you. That was last week. Last night was the first time he really talked about that 17th World Championship. And last night I thought was extremely significant, because last night he's like, I'm going for the 17th World Championship. I'm breaking the record. He stuck it to Flair. He's like, all you Ric Flair guys out there, your old school wrestling fans, basically, fuck you. And then he said, I'm winning this championship, and then I'm retiring as champion. Like, now I'm taking this title, the one that you thought I desecrated in 2005 by making it into a toy spinner belt, which he said that he did. And now he's going to take that championship again. He's going to win it. He's going to become the greatest world champion in WWE history. And then he's basically taking his ball and going home.
And I just want to stop on that point, because I would love that to happen for one reason. He said, I'm going to win the championship, and I'm riding off into the sunset, and I'm retiring as champion. Yes? We're in agreement?
Yes. Yep.
Now, remember my idea about John Cena winning the championship on his last night in the wrestling industry? What if everything that you're suggesting comes into play? Cena wins the championship at WrestleMania, holds the championship up until his very last night in the company, in which Cody is chasing. And on the last night, when it looks like John Cena is going to retire, on the last night, Cody defeats him for the world championship.
I love it. But again, what does that say, Bully? It goes back to The Empire Strikes Back. I feel like this is going to be an Empire Strikes Back moment. And you know how big a fan Cody is of the Star Wars franchise. Last year was A New Hope. This year is going to be Empire Strikes Back. How does it finish up? How does it end? We don't know. Man, it just feels to me like at WrestleMania 41, what John Cena said last night is what's going to come to pass.
I wouldn't do this in Boston, by the way, just because, but if his last night ever, Dave, if you were a pro wrestler or a rock star, where would you want your last show to be?
The Garden.
Madison Square Garden. Could you imagine John Cena's last night in the WWE, in professional wrestling, in Madison Square Garden, and Cody defeats John Cena in the Garden, which brings us back to my original suggestion of Cody winning the championship in the Garden.
Think about that. That is taking it full circle. Because like you've always said, WrestleMania 40 in Philadelphia, that's not where Dusty had his opportunity to beat superstar Billy Graham for the WWF Championship. It was at the Garden. How much more meaningful would it be for him to do it at the Garden? Well, that didn't happen. It happened at WrestleMania, which I still think was the right move, because to me, that's where it should be. But this is a completely different story. So imagine the picture side by side, because Cody talked about, like, on the mantle in his father's house was the picture of Dusty holding the WWF title at Madison Square Garden, even though he didn't win it. Imagine having that picture right next to it on his mantle of his dad holding the title and then Cody holding that title.
That is what I want to see now. Based on what John said, did anything stick out to you as odd? And odd is not the right word, but did he say anything that had you scratching your head or doing the proverbial Hulk Hogan, brother?
Well, the fact that he said he'll win the championship and retire, meaning that maybe he doesn't wait till the end of the year and maybe he retires after WrestleMania.
I found it interesting that he went out of his way to mention Ric Flair. Like, everybody knows he could have just said 17-time world champion. He didn't have to mention Flair's name, but he did. And I'm wondering why.
Oh, I think it's obvious. I think it's because he is the 16-time world champion. I think all fans know who holds that record, and it's Ric Flair.
Correct, they did. But to mention him by name, like, when I hear things like that, I immediately think seed planted.
I would be surprised, not shocked, but I would be surprised if at some point we don't see Ric Flair. Like, I would think you have to see Ric Flair at some point. He's the man who holds the record. Cena just mentioned his name last night. It involves Rhodes, Flair, right? I mean, wouldn't it be, to use your term, wouldn't it be odd if you don't see Ric Flair at all leading up to 41?
I think it would be very interesting to see Ric Flair involved in some capacity, because to have a Flair and a Rhodes involved in something, not that Rick is going to wrestle,
No.
but to be able to mention a Flair and a Rhodes in the same sentence, where it actually has a realistic chance of happening, as opposed to just some fantasy booking. Like, could you imagine? Remember when Cody was making his walk to the ring at 40? And he saw a bunch of people and he stopped and he pet the dog and he waved at this one and this one said good luck, and then the seamstress put his jacket on him and all that. Could you imagine if you saw Cody doing his walk to 41 and he just stopped and he looks over and the camera is delays, and then all of a sudden the camera pans over very slowly, and there is the 16-time world champion. Conversely, what if that's John Cena making the walk to the ring? And John Cena sees Ric Flair. Could you imagine the face-to-face with Cena and Flair? Hell, give me the face-to-face with Flair and Cody and Flair and Cena. But my point is to see a Flair and a Rhodes in the same shot at the same time. Not getting many more opportunities at this, kids.
No.
Could you imagine if they just looked at each other and didn't say a word? And then Flair just said, I mean, just one line of, Dusty's proud of you. something to that effect.
Well, Bully, and this is why it hit me so hard last night. I mean, listen, I'm getting older. I'm an old school pro wrestling fan. I've been watching since I've been 10. I grew up watching Flair and Dusty Rhodes. As time goes on, pro wrestling evolves, pro wrestling changes, records are broken. Knowing that Ric Flair is a 16-time world champion and there's never been anybody to win it a 17th time, that still holds Flair as the greatest world champion. Now, listen, I get it, Bully. You and I can get into a discussion about, hey, Ric Flair, even if he doesn't hold the record anymore, is still the greatest world champion.
We've discussed it to death.
Yeah, but I'm not even talking about that. In the record books, Ric Flair's name is going to be erased, and John Cena's name is going to be on that record book as the 17-time world champion. And I'm not saying that you're going to forget about Flair and forget about Dusty Rhodes and forget about that era. But with the passage of time, it moves on. It marches forward. John Cena is going to be the greatest world champion of all time. I've said it since we started in 2009. The WWE is going to want one of their own as the record holder for the greatest world champion of all time. John Cena is that guy. 17-time world champion. Ric Flair, though, he's that last link to the past. John Cena doesn't know what it's like to wrestle around the world and face a different adversary every single night. John Cena didn't wrestle in the territories. John Cena is the modern day WWE pro wrestler. So that last link of the past for me, that's kind of gone once this record is broken. Because whenever they talk about the record and whenever they talk about the greatest world champion of all time, people are going to still woo and people are going to say the name Ric Flair. Hell, Bully, we just heard the name Ric Flair last night in John Cena's promo. Once that record's broken, you're not going to hear it anymore. Now it's John Cena. That's the exact point he was making. Once I win that 17th world championship, you're going to forget about Ric Flair, and I'm going to be the guy. And then I'm going to retire so nobody could beat me. And it's going to be in the record books. All those people that hated the PG era and all the people that hated John Cena, when it's all said and done in the record book, the greatest world champion of all time is going to be the name John Cena. That kills me, Bully. And I know there's a lot of fans that feel the same way. Man, I heard that promo last night and I was like, man, this is my last gasp. Cody Rhodes is my last gasp. It's the last link to the past. So to your point, Bully, God, how great would it be if Cody Rhodes is doubting himself more than any other time in his career, and it's Ric Flair that walks into the camera to give him that final pep talk before he steps into the ring at WrestleMania 4. You want to talk about goosebumps? Holy shit, Bully. As you were describing it, I was getting goosebumps because that's my guy. Flair's my guy.
And if anybody would have the talk with Cody or anybody would have the face-to-face with Cena, it's Rick, because Rick is tied to Cody through Dusty, obviously, and Rick is now tied to Cena because Cena is trying to break his record. It really, really works. And I'm a mark for the fact that I could get a Flair and a Rhodes in the same shot at the same time.
As much as Ric Flair could say publicly, oh yeah, John Cena did, he really doesn't want to see his record broken.
Well, I'm actually trying to apply this to myself, Dave, because myself and Devon for the longest time were the most successful and decorated tag team in the WWE. And then our record was broken by the New Day. Not in exactly the same way that me and Devon did it. There was an exchanging of a championship that one time that they recognized, but I didn't have any problem with the New Day breaking our record. And when it comes to, you know, championships and amount of championships and legitimacy of championships, me and Devon are kind of up there. I didn't have a problem with that record being broken. And not that this is a record, but the most decorated team of all time. Nobody's ever breaking that most decorated team of all time. And unless the Hardys find a way to win the IWGP World Tag Team Championships, they're not the guys either.
Yeah, and I mean this not in a physical sense, but in a mental sense. There's a big difference between Bully Ray and Ric Flair, meaning the fact that Bully, like, you know, obviously you have your wrestling career that you celebrate, you love. It's a huge part of who you are, but it doesn't define you as a human being. Am I correct in saying that?
Correct.
Ric Flair's a different story.
Yes, I understand what you're saying now.
And I just feel like, and listen, he may come on our air and say, you know what? I did it. I celebrated it. I lived it. I'm good. God bless. I hope John Cena beats my record at WrestleMania 41. Or he might come on and be like, no, I want to keep this going, man. This is part of my legacy. This is part of who I am. I could still say I am the greatest of all time. Once John Cena beats that record, I can't say that anymore. Now John Cena has become the greatest of all time.
And this is why it was odd for me to hear Cena drop Flair's name last night. You didn't have to mention Ric Flair. You didn't have to mention, he could have got around that without using Ric's name. I'm just wondering. And let me ask you this. If Cena were to break the record, does Ric Flair need to be there to hand John Cena the championship?
Wow, if John Cena was a babyface, I would say yes. Like, have a bit of a ceremony. But maybe you can play into that as him being heel, where because
Ric is still the dirtiest player in the game.
It's true. The ultimate heel of heels, Ric Flair.
I mean, if you went out of your way to mention Ric Flair's name, and everybody knows that Ric Flair is 16-time, and if John Cena were to win, do we need to see Ric Flair physically hand that championship to John Cena, basically saying, yep, you're number one now?
And people will say, all right, with Sting, you know, Ric Flair made Sting, and you know, the greatest matches that Ric Flair had was those 3 matches with Ricky Steamboat, yada, yada, yada. The greatest rivalry of Ric Flair's career was Dusty Rhodes. Like, they're synonymous with one another. I still say it's the greatest feud in pro wrestling history is Ric Flair versus Dusty Rhodes. So you could play into maybe, you know, what's even more important than the 17th championship is maybe his hatred for Dusty and the Rhodes family. I mean, you could play into that as well.
You have an opportunity for a Flair and a Rhodes to do business in some capacity one last time. It's not going to happen anymore. Listen, years ago I said I'd love to see Charlotte wrestle Cody just so we could see their names on the marquee. I stand by that. I would love to see that. Charlotte is that good that she should be wrestling men. End of story. So, but with Cena trying to break the record, Flair's record, and who's trying to retain a title, a Rhodes, the arch enemy of a Flair, I'll be damned if there's not something there, Dave.
No, and listen, again, I want people to be clear. We're not talking about Rick stepping in the ring or Rick getting physical. We're not talking about that at all. We've passed that. I nobody wants to go down that road. But the influence of Flair, the history of Flair, the fact that the record that would be broken is Flair's record, I feel like he needs to make an appearance on TV. There needs to be a face-to-face with, like you said, with Cena or with Cody or with both. There needs to be, you need that programming. You need that on, that's just great TV.